Ikarus. Well known behind the Iron Curtain for their innovative and mass-produced buses, they very rarely strayed beyond the communist bloc. But in the early 1970s, a breakthrough occurred for a new and very simple bus bound for Baghdad. This is the story of the Ikarus 553, the bus that was so simple it was dubbed the cardboard box. Hi, this is Jeffrey. Now, I'm sure many of you are familiar with Ikarus buses, and I've done a number of videos of some of the more interesting models in the recent past. Now, as you also probably know, Ikarus sold their buses mainly behind the Iron Curtain, with anything beyond that very few and far between. However, in the early 1970s, a breakout occurred whereby they won a contract to supply Iraq with a substantial number of smaller-sized buses. These were to be some of the most simplest buses ever built by Ikarus, and they were quite successful, and even the Czech Republic had a large number of them as well. It's a really interesting story, so let's get started in learning about the Ikarus 553, also known as the cardboard box bus. The Hungarian bus builder Ikarus was able to succeed in Western countries with some of its products, but the number of units sold was not significant compared to their total production volume. In addition to the effort to break through the Western Wall, the attention of the Ikarus sales department began to focus on another area in the early 1970s. Nations that are often somewhat disparagingly called third world countries. For states with lower purchasing power, extremely simple bus designs were to be created. These initial designs were the Ikarus 668 and 669 models of 1973, built on an Austrian Steyr chassis and intended for Nigeria. However, serial production did not take place. Also in 1973, Ikarus won a contract to build a bus manufacturing plant near Baghdad, Iraq. The extremely simple design of the new Ikarus 553 was to be created with regard to local production conditions in Iraq. In the meantime, Ikarus decided to label special models for the Middle East and Africa with the 500 number series, and so the Ikarus 551, 552, and 553 types were created for Iraq. The first two were standard-length vehicles of 11 meters based on the Scania B80 and B110 chassis. The last one was to be a roughly 6-meter-long midi bus built on the E24 chassis from the French company Saviem, which fully merged with Renault in 1979. Production of the 553 in Baghdad began in 1974 and were the first of the three new types to be built. The 553 became very popular in Iraq, and demand significantly exceeded the capacity of the local plant. In the case of the types 551 and 552, which were first assembled in 1975, those buses were soon discontinued when only 297 units left the production line by 1976. After which the successor types, namely the Ikarus 554 and 555, took over, and production of these continued until the late 1980s. By 1980, over 2,600 Ikarus 553s were to be produced for Iraq alone, of which only 800 went to the plant near Baghdad in the form of kits, while the rest were fully assembled deliveries from Hungary, which significantly increased profitability for Ikarus. In addition to Iraq, thanks to ties with France, 150 Type 553 buses were also delivered to Madagascar in 1979. Now, let's take a look at some of the basic specifications of the Ikarus 553. Number 1, length is 6.31 meters. Number 2, width is 2.3 meters, with later Iraqi buses being 2.1 meters. Number 3, height is 2.69 meters. Number 4, unloaded weight is 4,415 kilograms and the loaded weight is 6,600 kilograms. Number 5, engine is the Avia 712.11 of 3,200 RPM. Number 6, passenger capacity is 19 to 23 seated passengers. And finally, number 7, top speed is 80 kilometers per hour. Production of the Ikarus 553 buses for Iraq continued until 1981. At the very end of the cooperative assembly, it was designated in Iraq as Type MR002, which differed in a narrower body width, but Ikarus itself did not change the type designation. A total of 470 narrower Ikarus 553 vehicles were produced. In addition to the Ikarus 553 for Iraq and Madagascar, buses with the same type designation were also produced for Hungary and Czechoslovakia. A total of 1,145 vehicles were to be produced between 1977 and 1981, of which 818 were for the Czechoslovak Socialist Republic and 327 for the Slovak Republic. For the production of these buses, a Avia A30 chassis with an Avia 712.11 engine were used, which were licensed from Saviem, with whom Avia concluded a licensing agreement in 1967. It was therefore practically identical to the original Ikarus 553 buses for Iraq, but using not an imported chassis, but chassis already manufactured in Czechoslovakia. Final assembly took place at an Ikarus plant in central Hungary, and the body design used was the same as for Iraq, except that it was 200 millimeters wider. These small buses, produced basically in the shape of a cardboard box, as it was said, were supplied to Czechoslovakia in two basic versions. The dominant version was the 553.04 Lux subtype, which had 19 high passenger seats. The more basic 553.03 vehicles with a capacity of 23 seated passengers were also supplied. Bus deliveries between 1977 and 1981 were dispersed across Czechoslovakia. Typical customers were entities ranging from engineering to health institutes to food, including the Valim chocolate factory. Ikarus 553s were also received by urban transport companies. A handful of units ran in Prague, as well as several smaller cities. But the vehicles were generally avoided on regular transport. The production of the Ikarus 553 buses ended when the too simple Iraqi design was to be somewhat Europeanized. A very stylish prototype of the 553 was built, which used a number of elements from the ongoing production of the Ikarus 200. But at about the same time, the design of a new vehicle with a more modern outline and a sloping front end began, built on an identical type of chassis, which was named the Ikarus 543. But that's another bus story. Overall, not bad for a so-called cardboard box. And so there it is, the story of the Ikarus 553, also sometimes known as the cardboard box bus. Now, even though this is not one of Ikarus's more well-known offerings, it's still a bus that should not be forgotten about. Now, when you compare it to its successor, the 543, there were far more 553s built than the 543. There were only between 900 and 1,000 543s built. So, anyway, I hope you enjoyed this look at the Ikarus 553. And as always, thank you so much for watching and have a great day. Bye.